A cowboy saved an Apache woman, and her tribe says their lives are united. The sun was just beginning to rise over the wide, empty plains of the southwest. The golden light stretched across the dry earth, touching the distant rocky hills and casting long shadows over the sparse shrubs. Jack McAllister, a lone cowboy, rode slowly across the dusty trail, his horse's hooves kicking up small clouds of sand with every step. He had been traveling for days, moving cattle from one town to another, and the desert stretched endlessly around him. Jack was used to the solitude. He liked it that way. The quiet gave him time to think, to remember the days when the world had felt safer, when the towns were full of laughter, and the nights were only filled with the sound of the wind and the stars above. Jack had grown up on these plains, the son of a rancher who had taught him everything about horses, cattle, and surviving in the harsh land. But the world had changed. More settlers were moving west, and conflicts between settlers and native tribes had become more frequent. Jack knew the stories of skirmishes, of families attacked, of lives lost over land or misunderstanding. He tried to stay out of trouble, to keep his head down and do his work honestly. Still, he had a reputation for courage, and when danger came close, he didn't shy away. That morning the wind carried a faint scent of smoke. Jack paused and lifted his hat, scanning the horizon. Smoke was unusual in these empty lands except for the campfires of travelers. But this smoke was different. It looked like it was rising quickly, not from a steady fire. His instincts told him something was wrong. Jack spurred his horse forward, moving cautiously toward the source. The desert was quiet, except for the faint whistle of the wind through the rocks and the distant cry of a hawk. Every step made Jack more alert, his hand hovering near the rifle on his saddle. As he drew closer to the canyon, he saw signs of struggle. Broken branches, footprints scattered in the sand, and a small cloak snagged on a cactus. Jack's heart tightened. He had seen many signs of people in trouble before, and this was no ordinary scene. He dismounted, moving quietly, his eyes searching for any movement. Then he saw her. Ahioka, a young Apache woman, lay behind a rock, her body bruised and bloodied from wounds on her arm and leg. She was alert, her dark eyes wide with fear, and she clutched a small bundle close to her chest. Jack raised a hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly, his voice calm but firm. "Can you move?" Ahioka shook her head, her lips trembling. They took the others," she whispered. Her voice was low but carried the weight of pain and fear. Jack could see that she had been hiding for hours, maybe even a day. Her clothes were torn and her feet were raw from running across the desert. She had survived something terrible. Jack took a deep breath. He had a choice. He could leave her, as some might say it was safer to avoid entanglement with Apache matters. But he couldn't. Something in him refused to let her face danger alone. Carefully he approached, keeping his movements slow so as not to frighten her further. "I'll help you," he said. "Can you stand if I support you?" Ahioka nodded weakly, and with great effort Jack helped her to her feet. She leaned heavily on him, her strength almost gone, but she kept her eyes on him, watching for any sign of betrayal. Jack led her to a more sheltered spot, behind a large boulder that would hide them from view. He examined her wounds. They were painful but not life-threatening if he treated them quickly. He tore a strip of cloth from his own shirt and began cleaning and dressing the injuries, careful to avoid hurting her further. While Jack worked, Ahioka's eyes studied him. She had been taught by her tribe to distrust outsiders, to be wary of anyone not of her people. But there was something different about Jack. He spoke softly, without judgment, and his movements were careful, respectful. He did not ask questions she was not ready to answer. He simply helped, and that alone began to build a fragile trust. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher, burning the plains with heat. Jack found some water in a small canteen and offered it to her. Ahioka drank cautiously, then leaned back against the rock, her body trembling from exhaustion. She was hungry, tired, and afraid, But for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of safety. Jack knew they couldn't stay there long. Raiders or other dangers might still be nearby, and the desert offered no permanent shelter. They had to move. Slowly, with Jack supporting her, they started walking toward a hidden valley he knew of, a place where he sometimes rested when traveling alone. It was far from towns and hidden from the main trails. The journey was hard. Every step was painful for Ahioka, but Jack encouraged her gently, helping her over rocks, keeping her from stumbling in the sand. Along the way, she told him her name. Ahioka, she said softly. It means she brings happiness. Jack nodded, smiling faintly. Then I'll remember that. You're bringing happiness right now for me anyway, he said lightly, trying to ease the tension. As they traveled, Ahioka began to share bits of her story. She spoke of her tribe, the land they had always lived on, and the attacks by raiders that had scattered them. Jack listened carefully, not interrupting, letting her speak at her own pace. The more she spoke, the more he realized how brave she was. She had survived alone in a harsh world, and she had done so with courage and resilience. By late afternoon, they reached the hidden valley. Jack helped Ahioka lie down on some soft grass, shading her from the sun with a blanket he carried. He looked around, making sure there were no signs of danger nearby. For a moment, the world seemed quiet and still, and the harshness of the desert faded behind the sheltering rocks and sparse trees. Jack sat beside her, thinking about what had happened and what might come next. He knew that helping her was not without risk. Settlers in the towns might distrust him for aiding an Apache woman, and other dangers were never far in the desert. But he also knew that turning away would be harder than facing any danger. He had acted out of simple humanity, and he had no regrets. Night fell slowly, and the desert sky lit up with countless stars. The cool air of the evening brought relief from the heat of the day. Jack kept watch, while Ahioka rested. She slept fitfully, haunted by the memories of her attack, but she was safe for the first time in days. Jack thought about the fragile trust that had begun to grow between them. He knew that tomorrow would bring challenges, but for now he allowed himself a quiet moment of satisfaction. He had saved a life, and in doing so he had found a connection that went beyond words. In the morning, Jack prepared a small meal, sharing it carefully with Ahioka. She was still weak, but she ate, and he could see her strength slowly returning. He spoke gently about the journey ahead, explaining that they needed to reach her tribe before more danger could reach her. Ahioka nodded, grateful but still wary. Trust was something she could not give lightly, but she felt that Jack was different. He had risked his own safety for her, and that mattered more than words. As they set out again, Jack felt a quiet sense of purpose. The plains stretched before them, challenging and wild, but he knew that together they could face whatever came. Every step was a test of endurance, every decision carried weight, but in the bond that was beginning to form between the cowboy and the Apache woman, there was hope, a hope that even in a world divided by fear and prejudice, humanity could prevail. The journey would be long, and danger was never far, but Jack and Ahioka walked side by side, bound by circumstance, courage, and the first fragile threads of trust. The desert, harsh and unforgiving, had brought them together, and neither would forget the day they met, the day their lives changed forever. By the end of the first day of their journey, the valley behind them grew smaller, and the path ahead seemed uncertain, but Jack felt a determination that burned as brightly as the rising sun. He would protect Ahioka, guide her to safety, and face whatever trials the desert held. For in helping her, he had discovered a truth as old as the plains themselves. Courage and compassion could unite even the most unlikely of allies, and in that unity lay strength greater than any weapon or army. And so, as the night sky spread its darkness over the desert once more, Jack and Ahioka prepared to rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, and perhaps the beginning of a bond that would change both of their lives forever. The morning sun rose over the desert again, painting the rocky hills with streaks of gold and orange. Jack McAllister and Ahioka had spent the night in the hidden valley, and though the night had been quiet, both were aware of the dangers that still surrounded them. The valley offered safety for now, but they could not stay long. Jack knew the desert well, and he also knew that raiders and other threats moved fast. Every day without food, water, or shelter increased the risk. Ahioka woke first, her dark hair falling over her shoulders as she stretched her sore muscles. The night had done her some good, but the bruises on her arms and legs reminded her of the attack she had survived. She looked at Jack, who was already tending to the small fire he had made. He was preparing a simple breakfast of dried meat and bread he carried in his saddlebag. The smell made Ahioka's stomach rumble, and she smiled faintly. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of normalcy. "Eat," Jack said gently, holding out some food. "You need your strength for the journey ahead." Ahioka hesitated, then took the food. She had learned from her tribe to be cautious with strangers, but Jack had shown nothing but care and respect. With each small act, the trust between them grew. They ate quietly, the only sounds being the crackle of the fire and the occasional cry of a distant bird. Once breakfast was finished, Jack helped Ahioka gather what little belongings she had. They packed carefully, making sure nothing was left behind that could slow them down. The journey to her tribe's village would not be easy. The land ahead was harsh and unforgiving, full of rocky canyons, desert shrubs, and steep cliffs. But Jack knew shortcuts through the land, hidden paths that only someone who had traveled these plains for years would know. As they walked, Jack noticed that Ahioka moved more steadily than before. Her steps were careful, but her strength was returning. He offered his hand when the terrain was rough, and she accepted it without hesitation. There was a quiet understanding growing between them. Each step was not just a movement through the desert, but a building of trust and connection. Ahioka began to speak more openly now, sharing stories of her tribe and her life before the attack. She described the Apache lands, the traditions, the songs, and the dances. She spoke of the elders who guided the people and the young warriors who protected the community. Jack listened carefully, fascinated by a world so different from his own. He had heard stories of native tribes before, but hearing Ahioka speak gave life to those stories. He realized that the people she spoke of were not just names in a tale. They were real, brave, and proud. Jack, in turn, shared small pieces of his own life. He spoke of the cattle drives, the long days on the trail, and the loneliness that sometimes came with traveling alone. Ahioka listened quietly, her eyes studying him. She had expected him to be just another outsider, perhaps someone who saw her people as a threat or a story. But here he was, helping her without judgment, learning about her life and treating her with respect. That alone was rare, and she felt a growing sense of safety beside him. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the desert heat began to press down on them. Jack led them to a small stream he knew of, hidden in a narrow canyon. The water was clear and cool, a small oasis in the harsh desert. They drank their fill and rested for a while, the sound of flowing water soothing their tired minds and bodies. Ahioka dipped her hands in the water and splashed her face, feeling the chill refresh her. She smiled at Jack, a rare moment of warmth breaking through the tension of the past days. But rest could not last long. Jack knew that time was against them. Raiders might still be in the area, and every hour they delayed increased the danger. They packed up again and continued their journey, moving carefully through the narrow canyon paths. The rocks were sharp and uneven, and Ahioka stumbled several times, but Jack's steady hand kept her from falling. Each small obstacle they overcame together strengthened their bond. As the afternoon wore on, they faced another challenge, a wide stretch of open desert with no shelter, where the sun beat down mercilessly. Jack shielded Ahioka with his jacket, trying to protect her from the heat. He encouraged her to take small steps, to pace herself, and to drink water frequently. She followed his advice, realizing that he understood the desert in a way she could not yet. His knowledge, his patience, and his care made her feel safer than she had in days. During a brief rest under a lone tree, Ahioka began to ask questions. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice quiet but sincere. "You could leave and it would be easier for you." Jack looked at her, his expression serious. "I don't leave people in danger," he said simply. "I don't care who they are. If I can help, I will." His words were straightforward, without pride or boasting, and Ahioka felt the truth in them. Few people acted like that in her world. Many cared only for themselves, for survival, for profit. But Jack's courage was not about bravery alone. It was about doing what was right. They continued their journey, moving toward the hills that Jack knew would bring them closer to Ahioka's tribe. Along the way, they encountered signs of wildlife, tracks in the sand, a distant coyote calling, and birds circling above. Jack taught Ahioka to recognize the signs, to move quietly and watch for danger. She listened carefully, learning from him as he had learned from her stories. It was a slow but steady exchange of knowledge, bridging two very different worlds. By late afternoon, they reached a small rocky ridge that overlooked a wide valley. Jack stopped and gestured for Ahioka to do the same. From there, they could see the path ahead and the land around them. The valley was empty, but Jack warned her that raiders could be nearby, hiding among the rocks. They would have to move carefully, staying alert to every sound and movement. Ahioka nodded, her body tense but ready. She had learned to trust him, but she also knew the desert was dangerous, and that trust had to be paired with caution. As they descended into the valley, the wind began to pick up, carrying the faint scent of smoke. Jack's eyes narrowed. "We need to be careful," he said. "Someone may be nearby." Ahioka's heart raced. She had faced danger before, but the desert was unpredictable. She clutched Jack's arm for support as they moved cautiously, stepping over rocks and keeping low to avoid being seen. The tension was heavy, but Jack's calm presence helped her stay focused. They were a team now, moving as one, each aware of the other's strengths and limitations. By evening, they reached a narrow canyon that led to a hidden part of the land Jack knew well. The rocks formed natural walls, hiding them from view and offering some protection from the wind. They made camp, careful to choose a spot that would be safe for the night. Jack built a small fire, keeping it low so it would not attract attention, and Ahioka gathered small branches and dry grass to help. As they ate their simple meal, Ahioka spoke again, this time about her fears. She told Jack about the raids on her tribe, the loss of family members, and the uncertainty of survival. Her voice was filled with sadness, but also with resilience. She had endured more than most could imagine, and yet she continued forward, refusing to give up. Jack listened quietly, his respect for her growing with every word. Night fell, and the stars appeared one by one in the clear desert sky. Jack kept watch while Ahioka rested, her breathing gradually slowing as she slept. The desert was still and quiet, but Jack knew that danger never truly slept. He thought about the bond that had formed between them, fragile but real. Trust was growing, and with it, a sense of hope. By the next morning, Ahioka's strength had improved noticeably. She moved with more confidence, her steps steadier, and she even smiled at Jack a few times. The journey was far from over, but each day brought small victories, survival, trust, and the knowledge that they could rely on each other. Jack felt a quiet sense of purpose. He had saved her once, but the journey ahead required constant vigilance. Every step mattered, every decision could be life or death. And yet, there was a growing connection between them, a bond forged in hardship and courage, one that neither fully understood but both felt deeply. As the sun climbed higher, Jack led Ahioka through the rocky paths, teaching her to move quietly and watch for signs of danger. They were learning from each other, slowly building skills and trust that would help them face whatever lay ahead. And though the desert was harsh and unforgiving, they found moments of peace and beauty. The quiet of a hidden canyon, the sound of water flowing over rocks, the soft touch of the wind after a long day in the sun. By the end of the second day of their journey, Ahioka and Jack had traveled farther than they had imagined possible. The desert had tested them, challenged them, and forced them to rely on each other. But through it all, they had grown stronger, not just physically, but in trust and understanding. They were no longer just a cowboy and a lost woman. They were partners in survival, united by circumstance, courage, and the quiet hope that tomorrow would bring them closer to safety. The morning sun rose over the desert once more, painting the rocky hills with bright streaks of gold. Jack McAllister and Ahioka had spent the night in a narrow canyon, hidden from view, but the dangers of the desert were far from over. Jack knew that they had to reach Ahioka's tribe before any raiders could strike again. Every day brought new challenges, and every step carried the weight of survival. Ahioka had grown stronger since Jack had first found her. Her bruises were fading, and she could walk longer distances without pain. Yet she was still cautious. She understood the desert's dangers, and she had learned to watch for signs of trouble. Jack noticed her vigilance and admired her bravery. She was not a helpless woman. She was resourceful, determined, and brave. Together, they formed a team, moving carefully through the rocky terrain. Jack led Ahioka through a series of narrow paths that twisted between cliffs and canyons. The desert here was wild and unforgiving, but he knew it well. He taught her how to move quietly over rocks, how to notice footprints in the sand, and how to recognize the signs of danger. Ahioka listened intently, learning quickly. Each lesson was a small victory, building her confidence and trust in Jack. As they walked, Ahioka told Jack more about her tribe. She spoke of the elders who guided the people, the warriors who protected the community, and the children who played near the riverbanks. She described the songs and dances of her people, the stories passed down from generation to generation, and the deep connection they had with the land. Jack listened quietly, fascinated by a world so different from his own. He had heard stories about native tribes, but hearing Ahioka's words made it real. He began to understand the strength, courage, and pride of her people. The sun climbed higher, and the heat of the day pressed down on them. They reached a small oasis, a hidden pool of clear water surrounded by shrubs and rocks. Jack and Ahioka drank deeply and rested for a while. The cool water was refreshing, and the shade offered a brief respite from the harsh desert sun. Ahioka splashed her face, feeling the coolness wash away some of the fatigue. For a moment, she allowed herself to relax, enjoying the safety that Jack provided. But peace never lasted long in the desert. As they prepared to move on, Jack noticed footprints nearby, fresh and scattered. He crouched down, examining them carefully. "Someone has passed this way recently," he said, his voice low. "Could be raiders." Ahioka's eyes widened. She had feared this moment. The desert was full of dangers, and raiders often traveled in groups, attacking anyone they found. Jack quickly assessed the situation. "We need to move quietly and stay low. Don't make a sound," he instructed. They carefully navigated the canyon, using rocks and shrubs as cover. The footprints led them toward a narrow passage between cliffs, a natural corridor that offered some protection but limited visibility. Jack and Ahioka moved slowly, alert for any movement or sound. The desert was quiet, but the tension was heavy. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat, and every gust of wind carried the possibility of danger. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from above. Jack froze and signaled Ahioka to do the same. A small group of raiders appeared on the cliff above, their faces hidden by scarves. They had not yet noticed Jack and Ahioka, but the danger was immediate. Jack motioned for Ahioka to stay low and follow him. He led her through a side path, moving quickly but silently, using the rocks as cover. The raiders shouted and pointed, but Jack's knowledge of the terrain allowed them to escape unseen. After a tense few minutes, they reached a safer area, hidden behind large boulders. Ahioka's heart raced, but she felt a sense of relief. Jack had saved her once again, using his experience and quick thinking to protect them both. She realized that his courage was not reckless. It was careful, calculated, and guided by a deep sense of responsibility. As they continued, the terrain became more rugged. Steep cliffs rose on either side, and the path narrowed to a thin ledge overlooking a drop of several feet. Jack helped Ahioka navigate the treacherous path, holding her hand and guiding her steps. Her trust in him had grown, and she followed without hesitation. Each step was a test of courage, but together they moved steadily forward. By late afternoon, they reached a vantage point that offered a view of the valley below. From this height, they could see the land stretching out before them, a mixture of rocky hills, open plains, and distant forests. Jack pointed toward a group of small dwellings hidden among the trees in the valley. "That's where your tribe is," he said. "We're close now, but we need to be careful. The final approach can be dangerous." Ahioka's heart leaped with hope. She had longed to see her people again, to return to the safety of her tribe, and now it was within reach. But she also felt fear. How would her people react to Jack? Would they see him as a friend or a threat? She knew that trust could not be assumed, even with someone who had saved her life. Jack seemed to sense her thoughts. "We'll go slow," he said. "I'll follow your lead and we'll show them we mean no harm." As they descended into the valley, Jack and Ahioka moved cautiously. They kept to the shadows, avoiding open spaces where they could be seen. The village was quiet and the people seemed wary. Ahioka led the way, calling out softly in her language to announce their presence without alarming the others. Slowly, the villagers began to emerge, curious but cautious. The elders, wise and careful, approached with measured steps. They studied Jack closely, their eyes filled with questions and suspicion. Ahioka stepped forward, introducing him carefully. "He saved me," she said. "He brought me back to safety." The elders exchanged glances, their expressions guarded. In their world, outsiders were often dangerous and trust was earned, not given. Jack bowed slightly, showing respect. "I mean no harm," he said simply. "I only helped because it was the right thing to do." A tense silence followed. The elders spoke among themselves in low tones, assessing the situation. Ahioka stood beside Jack, her presence a reminder of the bond they shared. Slowly, the elders nodded. They could see the truth in Jack's eyes, the sincerity of his actions. They allowed him to stay, though cautiously, and Ahioka's heart lifted with relief. That night, the village gathered around a small fire. Jack sat with Ahioka, sharing stories of the desert and listening to tales from her people. He learned about their traditions, their songs, and their way of life. Ahioka's tribe welcomed him slowly, testing his character with questions and small tasks. Jack responded with patience and humility, earning respect not through words but through his actions. But peace was still fragile. Raiders had attacked the area before, and the threat could return at any time. Jack and the elders discussed strategies to protect the village, combining his knowledge of the land with their understanding of the terrain. Ahioka watched, impressed by Jack's ability to think quickly and act decisively. He was not just brave, he was wise and careful, qualities that earned him a place among them. In the days that followed, Jack helped the tribe prepare for potential attacks. He taught them how to move quietly, watch for signs of danger, and use the terrain to their advantage. Ahioka's people began to trust him more, recognizing that his actions were guided by genuine care and courage. The bond between Jack and Ahioka grew stronger, and the tribe saw their unity as a symbol of hope. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky with shades of red and gold, Jack and Ahioka sat together, looking out over the valley. The village was quiet, the people working and playing, and for a moment the world felt safe. Ahioka leaned against Jack, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to help me, but you did." Jack smiled gently. "I couldn't turn away," he said. "No one should face danger alone." The desert stretched endlessly around them, harsh and unforgiving, but within the village there was safety, trust, and a growing sense of unity. Jack had saved Ahioka once, but now he was helping her people, protecting a community that had welcomed him despite their initial fears. Together, they had faced danger, learned from each other, and built a bond that went beyond words. The journey had been long, and the trials were far from over. But Jack and Ahioka had reached a turning point. The village was safe, for now, and the trust they had earned would carry them through the challenges ahead. Raiders might return, dangers might rise, but they were ready. The unity between Jack and Ahioka's tribe had begun, and with it, a new chapter of courage, loyalty, and hope was unfolding in the heart of the desert. As night fell and stars lit the sky, Jack kept watch once more. Ahioka slept beside him, her breathing calm and steady. He thought about the journey so far, the dangers they had faced, and the bond that had grown between them. The desert was still a wild and dangerous place, but together they had survived. Together they had found trust, courage, and the beginnings of something lasting. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now the desert was quiet and the village was safe. Jack and Ahioka had crossed a threshold, moving from danger into trust, from fear into hope. And in that quiet moment, under the vast desert sky, they knew that their lives, and the lives of those around them, were connected in ways that no danger could break. The sun rose over the Apache village, casting long shadows across the small homes nestled among the rocky hills. Jack McAllister had spent several days there now, helping the tribe prepare for any danger that might come their way. He had earned the cautious trust of the elders, and he and Ahioka had grown closer with each passing moment. But the desert was never truly safe, and Jack knew that more challenges could appear at any time. The morning was quiet, almost peaceful. Children ran along the paths, laughing and playing, while the elders discussed plans for the village. Jack watched quietly, feeling a sense of pride. He had never been part of a community like this before. The tribe welcomed him slowly, at first out of necessity, but now out of respect. He realized that saving Ahioka had led to something far greater, a bond not just between him and one person, but between him and a whole people. Ahioka approached him, carrying a small bundle of food. "The elders want you to join them for a meeting," she said softly. "They have questions about the raiders." Jack nodded. He followed her to the center of the village where the elders had gathered. Their faces were serious, their eyes thoughtful. They had seen his actions, his courage, and his care for Ahioka, but they still had concerns. Protecting the village required more than bravery. It required wisdom and understanding of the land, the people, and the enemy. One of the elders, a tall man with deep lines on his face, spoke first. "Jack McAllister, you have shown courage in saving Ahioka and leading her safely here, but there are still dangers. Raiders may return. How do we know you will help protect us?" Jack took a deep breath. "I am not here to take anything from you," he said simply. "I am here to help. I know the land, the paths, and the dangers. If the raiders come, I will fight with you. I will not leave. I will not run." The elders looked at one another, then nodded slowly. They could see the truth in his words. Jack's actions had proven his loyalty, but his words confirmed it. Ahioka stood beside him, her eyes shining with pride and relief. She knew that Jack's courage was matched by his honesty. The village spent the day preparing for any possible attack. Jack showed them how to use the terrain to their advantage, how to spot tracks in the sand, and how to create safe pathways for escape if needed. The young warriors practiced quietly, following his instructions carefully. Jack was not only teaching them new skills, He was showing that outsiders and insiders could work together, combining knowledge to protect the community. That evening, the village gathered for a meal. The fire burned brightly, and the smell of cooked meat and bread filled the air. Jack sat beside Ahioka, watching as the tribe shared stories and laughter. It was a moment of peace, but Jack knew it would not last forever. Raiders had attacked before, and they could attack again at any time. As night fell, the wind began to pick up. Jack stood watch on a small ridge overlooking the village, his eyes scanning the desert for any sign of movement. The stars were bright above, but the desert was dark and full of shadows. Every rustle of sand or distant sound made him tense. He had learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts told him that danger was coming. Sure enough, after several hours of quiet, a faint sound reached his ears, the soft crunch of footsteps in the sand. Jack crouched low, signaling to the young warriors who had joined him. They moved quietly, hidden behind rocks and shrubs, ready to protect the village. From the darkness, a group of raiders appeared, moving toward the village. Their faces were masked and they carried weapons intent on causing harm. Jack stayed calm. He had been through worse, and he knew that fear could make mistakes deadly. He whispered instructions to the warriors, positioning them strategically along the paths. "We wait for the right moment," he said. "Then we act together. No one fights alone." The raiders advanced, unaware of the preparations made by Jack and the tribe. When they reached the narrow paths leading to the village, Jack and the warriors struck. They used the terrain to their advantage, pushing rocks to block the paths and surprising the raiders from hidden positions. The fight was tense and fast, but Jack's leadership and the tribe's courage gave them the upper hand. Ahioka watched from behind a boulder, her heart pounding, but she did not panic. She trusted Jack and the tribe. Together, they had learned how to protect themselves and each other. The raiders, realizing they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered, began to retreat. Jack chased them briefly, ensuring they would not return immediately. When the desert grew quiet again, he returned to the village, tired but satisfied. The elders approached Jack, their expressions serious but respectful. "You have saved us," one said. "You have proven your loyalty, your courage, and your skill." "Our people are safe because of you," Jack shook his head. "I only helped because it was right," he said. "You protected your home and I helped you. That is enough." Ahioka stepped forward, her eyes shining. "Jack has become part of our tribe," she said. "He has shown that our lives are connected, that together we are stronger." The elders nodded. They had seen the truth in her words. Jack had saved Ahioka, helped protect the village, and earned their trust through his actions. The unity between Jack and the tribe was no longer fragile, it was real. In the following days, life in the village returned to a rhythm of work, learning, and community. Jack helped where he could, teaching, guiding, and supporting. Ahioka worked beside him, sharing knowledge of her people and learning from him. The bond between them grew stronger, and the tribe began to see that outsiders could be allies, not just threats. Jack and Ahioka spent time exploring the land, mapping paths, and identifying areas that could be dangerous. They worked with the warriors to create strategies, teaching them how to move silently, use the terrain, and watch for signs of danger. The tribe adapted quickly, impressed by Jack's knowledge and his willingness to share it without arrogance. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky with deep reds and oranges, Jack and Ahioka sat together, looking over the village. The people moved through the paths below, preparing food, tending to animals, and caring for children. For the first time in days, the world felt calm and safe. Ahioka leaned against Jack, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. "I never thought I would see my home again," she said softly, "and I never thought I would find someone like you." Jack smiled gently. "You saved me too, in a way," he said. "You showed me courage, patience, and trust. I am part of this now because of you." The night grew darker and the stars appeared, sparkling like diamonds in the desert sky. Jack kept watch, his eyes scanning the horizon, but his heart was lighter. He had faced danger, protected a life, and now found himself part of a community that had accepted him. The desert, harsh and unforgiving, had led him here, to a place where courage, trust, and compassion were stronger than fear or violence. In the weeks that followed, the village thrived. Jack helped with daily work, guided the warriors, and spent time learning from the elders. He became a trusted member of the community, not because of his strength alone, but because of his kindness, wisdom, and willingness to help. Ahioka remained by his side, their friendship deepening into a bond that both respected and cherished. The tribe often spoke of the day Jack saved Ahioka, telling the story to the younger generations. It became a tale not only of bravery but of unity, how two very different worlds could come together through trust and courage. Jack listened to these stories, feeling a quiet pride, but he knew that the real reward was the safety and happiness of the people around him. As the months passed, Jack and Ahioka continued to explore the land, helping the tribe improve their defenses and teaching them new skills for survival. The bond between Jack and the tribe grew stronger, and the villagers began to see him not as an outsider, but as a friend, a protector, and a part of their lives. One evening, as the desert sky turned a deep shade of purple and the stars began to twinkle, Jack and Ahioka stood on a small ridge overlooking the village. The firelight from the homes below flickered like tiny stars on the ground. Ahioka smiled, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Our lives are united now," she said softly. Jack nodded. "Yes," he said. "Together we are stronger. We protect each other and we care for each other. That is what matters." The desert stretched endlessly around them, harsh and wild, but within the village there was safety, trust, and unity. Jack had come as a lone cowboy, wandering the plains, but he had found a family, a purpose, and a community. He had saved a life, earned trust, and built a bond that would last. And in that quiet desert night, under the vast sky filled with stars, Jack and Ahioka knew that their lives, and the lives of the tribe, were forever connected. The desert, once a place of danger and solitude, had become a home, a place of courage, trust, and unity. And that unity, born of compassion and bravery, would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead.